breaking barriers and bridging the gaps between patients and doctors. Welcome to Brainstorming with the Docs and your co-hosts, Dr. Glenn Harrison and Dr. Kolby Condos.
All right, everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Brainstorming with the Docs. I'm Dr. Kolby Condos, my co-host, Dr. Glenn Harrison, the man in the tie. And today, we are going to be talking about something that has been kind of a hot button topic in social media and some other places recently, and that is the carnivore diet. If this is your first time listening and you have questions about your own health or questions on common health concerns, be sure to like and subscribe, turn on notifications, and go back through our playlist because we have a ton of content on there about some stuff that we've already broken down. So without further ado, we're going to get this thing going. We're going to explain what it is to you, what are some of its maybe therapeutic applications, and maybe what are some of the unintended consequences that you might have if you decide to pursue this diet. So let's get going, buddy. But first off, how's your day?
It's good. It was busy. I think just about as busy as yours.
Oh, man. I hope so.
Yeah, I was, I know we've been out of it for a little bit doing these recordings. I was looking forward to it. And this topic, I was just having dinner and I was like, wow, I grilled these ribs and they were smoked forever on my smoker. And it was, just amazing. I was like, I could just eat ribs only. And then I think, wow, well, that would cause some problems. So we're going to get into that today. Yeah, we're going to get into that today because many people would love that. However, there's some consequences. So maybe, Dr. Kolby, maybe just jump into it and define really what this carnivore diet is.
Sure. Carnivore diet really is what it sounds like, right? It's where you eat only meat. That's it. Animal protein, animal fat, animal everything. So that basically sums up what it is. This will probably be a shorter podcast because we don't have to go into the intricacies of how you apply this diet and all that stuff because it's basically like you want to follow the carnivore diet, eat some meat.
Yeah, but why do you see it's a trend and why do you see people are pursuing it and what are the benefits? What do you think the benefits are? Some of them that people are getting.
Sure. I think that the reason that it's gained some traction, especially recently, is because A, some popular people are doing it, and B, because people are always looking for ways to improve their health. And when they've heard testimonials or they've heard from, other sources about how it worked for them, then they're obviously like, oh, that seems like something that's very easy to implement, something that I can easily do. It doesn't require a whole lot of knowledge as far as like knowing, these are the properties of this food and this food and this food. It's basically like just eat healthy, farm raised animals or fresh caught fish or whatever. And it's easy to implement, right? So I think that that's part of the reason why it's become so popular is A, it's very easy to implement dietary wise, and B, because they've heard people that have had success with it. When we look at some of the reasons people have had good success with the carnivore diet, we look at basically kind of two different mechanisms, right? So we look at you're really removing a bunch of potential immune triggers when you pull certain foods out of your diet, one. And number two is if you're eating a lot of protein and fat like that, then you're going to avoid dramatic sways and peaks and valleys in your blood sugar. So that also can play into the inflammatory cascade. And that's really the only two I can think of off the top of my head.
And that's, I think that's all that I'm aware of, but how the benefits work and maybe kind of dissecting a little bit, reducing immune responses. So if people are like, okay, I can just eat meat, just like I was thinking earlier at dinner, and that's all they're doing is eating meat, well, it's a one-track mind. They don't have to think of anything else. There's no complexities. It's just follow meat. And in the standard American diet, there's always usually lots of meat around, and they fill up from it. But the benefits are coming, I believe, part of it, as you're saying, is the avoidance of the other things.
Yep.
The avoidance of the simple carbohydrates, the avoidance of the inflammatory foods, the avoidance of all of those things, those immune irritants. And animal protein by nature, very seldom do they irritate the immune system. So people who have multiple autoimmune conditions, and if they're just eating a carnivore diet initially, they're going to do pretty darn good because there's no food that's adding to their immune irritation. So that's kind of the one piece on, unpacking that. And you said avoiding immune trigger, or I should say blood sugar spikes and crashes. And that's kind of going on the same thing where people are avoiding the breads, the cereals, the simple carbohydrates, the sweets, if they're just eating animal protein, all the breads and cereals. So again, the avoidance is really where people are getting the benefits. Some people are going to lose weight. It's temporary reduction in inflammatory symptoms, maybe joint pain, and etc. So that's how I understand it. Do you have anything that you think you can add?
No, I think you summed it up pretty much exactly how I would have. I mean, it's avoiding the junk, really.
Yeah, just by focusing on one thing.
Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily that it's doing things to stabilize your blood sugar through the actual properties of the food, which it does, but it also is basically the majority of it is because you're not eating the stuff that is metabolized really quickly. It's broken down into really simple sugars that are there for 1 second and gone the next type of deal. So it's more of a sustained energy, and you're avoiding all the triggers that are going to basically cause those extreme spikes in blood sugar. And then again, the crashes at the bottom end.
That's right. So just from the avoidance. Now that is short-term benefits. And I think most people could get these short-term benefits from it. If not everybody, if you're comparing it to a standard American diet full of cereals and grains and simple sugars. But what are the short-term effects, consequences of the carnivore diet?
So obviously you get the benefits short-term really pretty quickly. But I would say some of the consequences, and we've talked about this before, is when you start to limit the diversity in your diet, when you start to eliminate things like, fiber from plants and fruits and vegetables, then you start to limit the amount of biodiversity in your gut, right? So when we talk about biodiversity, we're talking about the little bugs that live in your gut that help you break down, absorb, and ultimately kind of in a way manufacture different things like neurotransmitters or amino acids in your gut. When you don't have a diverse diet like that, what happens is that those bacteria start to die off. Right. So then all of a sudden these key players in our physiology that help us make energy, help us make all of these hormones and these chemicals that help our brain communicate to the other parts of our body and stuff, all of a sudden those bugs start to die off. So then we can start manifesting other symptoms, whether that's fatigue or lack of energy or difficulty concentrating, or as a result of reduced gut diversity, then you develop maybe a leaky gut. I mean, all these things are potential consequences of being on a carnivore diet long term. Mm-hmm. And I think if you listen back on some of these people that have done it, when they start to say things like, it was really good, but about week number 2, I started getting like a lot of diarrhea. I started getting a lot of like watery stool, that type of things. That can be a clue like, okay, maybe we're losing gut diversity now, and our biodiversity and our intestinal flora is starting to die off. So we're no longer metabolizing this stuff like we were before.
Exactly. So if we kind of, just to simplify it, our body's made out of bugs, really. And our bugs keep everything alive, regenerating tissues, brain function. We need bugs to even be able to break down the nutrients that we're consuming to make, B12 and all of these things. The bugs are helping us create an absorption and maintaining intestinal linings and integrities of tissues. And then if we don't feed those bugs, they die off, like you said. And then we start to see slow detrimental damage to all of these organ systems because the bugs aren't there to keep it running. And initially, things could be great. Long-term, things could have dire consequences. And another thing maybe to note for anybody listening is as we age, our biodiversity comes down. And there's no field of medicine. There's no field in medicine that doesn't look at biodiversity as an important factor. Everything from neurology, cardiology, and gastroenterology, of course, dermatology, everybody is looking at biodiversity, but they don't have drugs to fix it and to manipulate it. So it kind of gets stuck in the research and there's no practical application. So we want to feed these bugs, I guess, and the carnivore diet is not going to do that long term. And if we were all wolves and dogs and bears, well, bears still need some fiber, we would do fine. But we're humans. We're supposed to be consuming a little bit of plant species as well. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, I think too that you just kind of piqued something in my brain. When we look at too our ability to manufacture basically energy in our gut, we need short chain fatty acids. Mm-hmm. And we do that from basically fiber in plants, whether that's vegetables or fruits. You take that away, all of a sudden the cells in the inside of your gut aren't making energy anymore. So then you can get that fatigue because
Right.
your gut's not healthy. Not A, you're missing the biodiversity to break down the stuff you're eating, but B, you're also not feeding the cells.
The biodiversity. Yeah.
That's it. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a big amplifying loop where you don't have the bugs to do it, but you're not feeding the bugs, but then the bugs aren't feeding you either. And then that makes a problem.
Yeah. And I don't think there's really any limit to the effects that biodiversity has on the body that we know of. We could be talking for hours here and combing through research, and every organ system and every tissue in the body would be influenced by biodiversity, by bacterial species. So it's really the glue that keeps us together and turns on life, if you want to put it that way. So we need to feed them, I guess.
Exactly.
So hopefully this is helpful. I think it was, to debunk some of it, because everybody has the fast reaction. This is what I want, and not know about long-term consequences, especially for people with inflammatory conditions like autoimmune disorders, where they're trying to pull out immune triggers. So they go to this and they feel pretty good, and they think it's the have-all everything, and it actually it could, and I think we could expect it would make autoimmunity worse in the long term.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that you basically just summed up a good point that we've talked about before in our podcast as well, is that it's not necessarily that it's wrong and it's not necessarily right, but it might be a good tool to have in your bag if it's used appropriately. Like we talked about with the keto diet, probably not right for everyone all the time, but it could be a very good tool if it's used in the right capacity. So I think that it does have some promise, but maybe knowing when to apply it and when you want to start tailoring it to include some other stuff, probably going to be the best approach.
Yeah, I completely agree. Versus, and we had a series of different diets we've talked about, and all or none is really not the way of any kind of human health. It's only a tool where you pull it out and you know when to use it, you know how to use it, and you know how long to use it for, if it's even right for you. So yeah, food is powerful.
You got it, buddy.
Yeah.
So again, this is your first time watching us. This is a little bit shorter. Our normal episodes usually go a little bit longer than this one. But if you got value from this, or you have questions associated with any other health concerns, be sure to check out our link to our podcast. Look back through some of the older episodes. We're always rolling out new content. And yeah, stay tuned, because we're going to continue to do this. We enjoy this. And we feel like if we can provide value to even one person, then it was worth our time. So stay tuned.
All right, Dr. Kolby, that was great. I look forward to the next one.
Till next time, bud.